That logistics expertise of the food banks and those partnerships with retailers, that's helping to make sure those resources reach those community programs that folks are familiar with. And that's the support that they're able to provide. We have almost 3,000 partner agencies in our network.
Well, hello, everyone. My name is John Zimmerman. Welcome to Shelf Confidence, a podcast brought to you by the Pennsylvania Food Merchants Association that focuses on the trends and challenges and innovations in the food and beverage industry. Today's conversation focuses on food access, hunger relief, and the critical role retailers play in supporting communities across Pennsylvania. We're joined by Feeding Pennsylvania, the statewide network of food banks serving every county in the Commonwealth. Joining us are Julie Bancroft, Chief Executive Officer, and Ryan Prater, Director of Public Policy. Together, they help lead Feeding PA's work with food banks, policymakers, and industry partners to make sure families have access to the foods they need. Thank you guys so much for coming on the show, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Been looking forward to this for quite some time. So we're just going to go ahead and dive into the questions and go at it here. So to start, can you guys share the origins of Feeding PA and how it grew into a statewide network that we know today?
Sure. So Feeding Pennsylvania, as you mentioned, is a state association of Feeding America food banks. And the state associations in the Feeding America network are completely voluntary. They're at the will of the food banks. So not every state with Feeding America food banks has a state association. We're fortunate that Pennsylvania does. And so our food banks in 2011 decided to create a state association. And humble beginnings. I don't even think it was staffed initially, and then eventually had one person running operations for Feeding PA. So there were kind of some key milestones that really helped grow the organization into what it is today. So I would start with something that came to be later in our organization's history is managing the past contract, which we'll talk about later. But that was originally started with the Central PA Food Bank, one of our members, even before the program was funded. And so they started that in 2015. And we took that over as a statewide contract in 2020. So that was definitely a key milestone for Feeding PA. And then also our Fill a Glass with Hope campaign, which also started as a pilot between two of our member food banks. And that's a charitable milk program to help get fluid milk into the food banks and serving neighbors across the state. And then another really significant milestone, and one that's especially important for retail partnerships and food rescue, is the creation of the Mid-Atlantic Regional Cooperative, which is a program of Feeding PA. We refer to it as the MARC, and it is based in Philadelphia at the Philadelphia Wholesale Produce Market. And that was, again, an initiative of the Feeding America Network. There are only now 11 of these across the country. So we're very fortunate to have one of those under the Feeding PA umbrella and have a phenomenal team in Philadelphia with lots of logistics experience and sourcing experience. But that helps our food banks, not only our food banks, source produce, but also serves the larger Mid-Atlantic region. So I think you'll learn throughout our conversation today, it's a very collaborative network that not only works locally, but regionally and nationally. So that was another really key milestone, and we've seen a lot of growth with the MARC. And then in 2019, we started the Healthy Pantry Initiative. That's a statewide contract, and that's been wonderful and helps to get resources into local pantries to help educate neighbors about making healthy choices, how to use foods in the pantries. And then, like I said, in 2020, we took on the past contract. So we're the contractor for the Department of Agriculture. That's one of our cornerstone program, I would say. And so we've grown significantly since our humble beginnings. And 2026 is actually we're celebrating 15 years as an organization. So,
well, congratulations on 15 years. I'm actually very familiar with the Healthy Pantry Initiative. I think that's great.
great.
But no, very familiar actually. I'd love to pull the thread on the MARC a little bit more. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? I wasn't as aware of that one.
Yeah, so the MARC, like I said, this was an initiative of Feeding America. And what it is, it's really a lot of tailored solutions for food banks. So we don't actually have warehouses of our own. That's the other really interesting thing about the Mark. The Mark facilitates the movement of more than 60 million pounds of produce each year without their own
Wow.
warehouses. That's done in partnership with logistics suppliers, and but the team has deep logistics expertise, and so they largely source fresh produce, and that a lot of that is retail rescue. Some of that is buying directly from farms, and they're sourcing up and down the East Coast. They're also bringing in imports, where that's the value of being at the wholesale produce market, being able to work with importers, being that close to the ports. So also being able to source those, you know, culturally preferred foods that we don't grow here or are not seasonal. But what it does is it really allows our food banks to have access to really customized solutions. So a small food bank, you know, they might not be able to take an entire truckload of watermelons, for
Yeah.
instance, but the Mart can bring in large volumes of produce and then break it down into sizes that work for food banks and agencies. And then with their logistics expertise, they can make sure that those products are getting to those local communities in the most efficient way possible. So often, you know, going on multiple stops. And then they're able to mix commodities on truckloads also. So it's just really tailored solutions using that expertise to work at scale for then very tailored and quantities that are manageable for local organizations.
I think it's awesome. It's like it's a distribution center kind of a concept then.
Yeah, yeah,
Huh.
basically, yeah.
Mhm. You guys do that with other feeding, I guess, insert state name here. Do you work? I know you said it was with the Mid-Atlantic region.
So yeah, so that's 14 states in the from Maine to Virginia,
Mm.
and lots of really interesting collaborations across state lines. And then I should also note, I mentioned kind of that national network collaboration. So our team at the Mark will also work with other regional cooperatives across the Feeding America network. So they work frequently with the one in the Southeast, the Southeast Regional Cooperative. There are protein pack rooms across the country too. So they'll leverage those relationships. So it's really about efficiency and logistics expertise to make sure you know, no food is going to waste and it's getting to exactly where it needs to go.
Well, teamwork makes the dream work, right?
That's
That's
right.
amazing. So, I know we're talking a lot of stuff over many years here. I'd love to hear a little bit more how the mission has shifted. I know you've kind of talked about some of these programs, but how's the mission shifted since you guys started in 2011?
I wouldn't say that the mission itself has shifted. I think our goal is to support our member food banks, and you know, they're really there to serve individuals facing hunger in their communities. So we want to make sure that we are helping them to serve the communities as best as possible. So while the mission hasn't shifted, I would say the response has shifted. And you know, certainly we're trying to be to help resource the food banks in ways that help them respond to the changing landscape. Unfortunately, you know, we would all love to see hunger eradicated, but what we unfortunately see is the opposite. The rate of food insecurity continues to increase over time rather than go down. So it's really about making sure that we can get the most resources possible to the food banks. We're supporting them. We're creating spaces for sharing best practices. And then also just, you know, Ryan will get into some of this later, but I'm sure, but responding to policy changes as well that impact individuals who are facing hunger and food insecurity. So, you know, something that comes to mind that was very recent is, of course, the changes that are resulting from the implementation of HR1. So expanded SNAP work requirements. You know, so we're seeing individuals losing access to their benefits, and even seeing the halting of SNAP payments in November. those two things kind of combined, we're not seeing necessarily a complete recovery from that, so we're seeing individuals um, not having the access to SNAP benefits that they once had, and then they have to turn to the charitable food system. So our food banks are seeing increased numbers. Of course, there was kind of this peak of demand during that SNAP payment halt, but it has not returned to quote unquote normal, because that's going to have kind of a cascading impact for quite a bit. And we want to be there to support the food banks. So we were really fortunate to be able to help facilitate the emergency funds that the Shapiro administration made available, and we're able to do that incredibly quickly through our network and make sure that that emergency food was able to get to neighbors in a matter of days. So yeah, I think it's really just like helping them to respond. So the mission isn't changing, but the response is.
No, I totally understand that. To say the least, yeah, 2025, some very dramatic policy changes, to say the least. Um,
Absolutely.
so no, we're talking really on a macro level. I'd love to just ask you a question, Julie. So you, as as the CEO of Feeding PA, I'd love to know what guides you to lead this organization. I'd love to know, what drives you and what helps you do this work.
Yeah, well, I think for me, again, it's even though we are here to support the food banks, that's our role as an organization. It's really focusing on the needs and the experience of the neighbors experiencing hunger, because at the end of the day, that's the those are the communities that our food banks are serving, and so whatever we need to do to be able to help them serve those individuals as best as possible. And I think you'll hear that a lot throughout the day. That's really what guides us, and that's how we're prioritizing our work and looking at policy and responding, is really just trying to keep the neighbors and families experiencing hunger, keep them central to the core of our mission.
Well, I think that's great. So, for those who don't know, obviously, the uninitiated, what does a typical week look like for Feeding PA? Obviously, we're talking about a lot of big programs, but I'd love to get kind of into the nitty-gritty of what a typical week looks like for you guys.
Yeah, so I think a lot of the work we do is it's a lot of public awareness, a lot of education about what hunger and food insecurity looks like across the Commonwealth, in communities. Like I already mentioned, we work very collectively, a collective voice for advocacy and policy change, for our food banks and for neighbors experiencing hunger. So obviously that's going to change in terms of what's happening from a policy perspective. And then from a we talked about the mark as well. So in our statewide programs. So on a week to week basis, we're helping food banks source fresh Pennsylvania products through the PASS program. Especially that happens year round, but especially during harvest season. So when we're in the peak harvest season, those are going to be some really busy times where there's a lot going on. We also have the Bid Buy Donate program. That's during peak fair season, and that's a program where individuals can donate animals from livestock auctions. And so there's definitely some peaks and valleys in terms of our sourcing work.
Right.
And then, like I already talked about, the mark, and that is full speed all year round, doing those tailored solutions to help our food banks in the larger network, looking at innovative solutions like mixed pallets. And we have a program called the Boundless Collaboration, and that helps bring in donated dry good products from retailers and mix those with fresh products and get those out to food banks. So there's that stuff's happening all of the time, week in, week out, certainly with some peaks and valleys based on seasonality of growing seasons here in Pennsylvania and the larger region.
No, for sure. Hunting season, growing season, they all come in at different times, I imagine. Yeah, for
Hmm.
sure.
Yeah.
So we kind of touched on SNAP a little bit. I'd like to take a little bit of a deeper dive into that just for a second here. So obviously SNAP is essential for families and the retailers who serve them. How does Feeding PA view SNAP's role in reducing hunger, and what are the biggest misunderstandings that you guys run into?
Yeah, and I'll jump in on that one, kind of in
Awesome.
the policy space. SNAP is the largest, anti-hunger nutrition program in the United States.
Ever.
And I guess I'll back up in the acronym Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program for people who aren't up to date on all their government acronyms, formerly called food stamps. But yeah, it's the largest anti-hunger program in the United States. In Pennsylvania, it serves nearly 2 million Pennsylvanians. Nationwide, that's about 40 million Americans. And it brings in about $350 million a month to Pennsylvania's food economy. It's a huge number, but we know data has shown, time and time again, that every $1 of SNAP turns into $1.50 of economic activity, right? So it supports from the farmer that is growing the food to the truck driver that, transports the food from the farm to the retailer to the cashier checking you out, right? Every $1 of SNAP contributes to $1.50 of economic activity. And I think some misunderstandings. I think kind of this whole waste, fraud, abuse challenge, narrative that we've heard. Right, the SNAP was created in over 50 years ago, kind of on a bipartisan basis to address what they were seeing at the time, the effects of malnutrition across the American population. Right, seniors having high healthcare costs, children not learning at school, parents and adults not being productive at work or as productive as they could be. And it was this bipartisan basis that we agreed that all Americans should have access to a basic, amount of food to sustain them. And so, I think just this waste, fraud, abuse narrative is really frustrating at times. Over 70% of Pennsylvania SNAP recipients are either under the age of 18, over the age of 55, or have a disability. It's a means tested supplemental program that has strict reporting requirements. And the average benefit comes out to $6 per day for food assistance that you can only purchase food. And so really the waste, fraud, abuse narrative that I think, it's been over many years is really, just wrong.
I know $6 a day is not. I know they do the challenge periodically where they try to live off the six, and it's hard. It's really hard. I watch people do this yearly, and it's just like,
Yeah.
my goodness,
Especially,
that's a challenge
yeah,
to say the
the
least.
price, and the price of food right now. Yeah,
Oh
I
my
encourage
goodness,
folks. Yeah, you see all the time. Taking the SNAP challenge of
it's not
just
good.
for a week, try to live off $6 a day, so $42 in a week. Certainly, obviously, very challenging.
Yeah, it's been my coffee budget on a few weeks on
Yeah,
occasion, to say the least. I'm not proud of that, but
yeah,
yeah, but so you guys obviously, we're talking about the economic impact here. I mean, I feel like I'm having a flashback to my AP economics class, the multiplier effect. You're right. It does have an impact up and down the food supply chain. So, we obviously work with a ton of retailers. We're a trade association with grocers, retailers up and down the supply chain. So, obviously you guys work closely with grocers, convenience stores, distributors, manufacturers. How do these partnerships help strengthen the food system and increase access to healthy food and make it more reliable for everybody?
Yeah, so I retail partnerships are critical for the charitable food system. And I just talked a lot about our being part of the Feeding America network, and that's really critical when we talk about retail partnerships because the Feeding America network collectively is the largest food rescue organization in the country. And again, that is done in concert with retail partners, large national retail donors, local retail donors at the local and regional level. So the Feeding America network collectively rescues more than 5 billion pounds of food each year. And again, I think it's really important to look at that as a national network because so much sharing of resources happens through those national retail donors and then at the regional level as well. And being part of this network, our food banks have deep expertise in food rescue, food safety, and then have those deep partnerships, which we're grateful. I know so many of them are your members also, and those relationships just really help to transform what happens in communities, reduce, namely reducing food waste and really helping the great healthy foods get to neighbors in need. So another benefit of working within the Feeding America network is that there's what's called the Meal Connect app, and that helps retailers share uh, donations. And so that gets like I mentioned earlier, that logistics expertise. It's really helping to match the resource with the area of need, and so that can go. Those donations can go multiple places. And then when we take that down to the local level, which again is just as critical as that national kind of partnership and work that happens. But at the local level, again, those partnerships are so critical. So there's kind of, we talk about agency enabled donations. So sometimes these donations are able to be made, those relationships between retailers and food banks, those donations can go directly to food pantries, completely bypassing the food bank. So really, again, just getting the resources to where they're needed most. And then for retailers, it of course is helping from an inventory management perspective, in a food waste reduction perspective, and it's helping to build goodwill in the community. And a lot of what happens, unfortunately, isn't seen by the public. It's all behind the scenes, and
Always.
it's such important work that happens. And there are even innovative partnerships between retailers and food banks to invest in infrastructure like cold storage, and to make sure that frozen foods and proteins can be safely rescued and redistributed. But I will note one of the things that is very common, a very common partnership and awareness campaign between food banks and retailers are Roundup, register Roundup campaigns.
Yes.
Because so much of this does happen behind the scenes, those register Roundup campaigns are a great way to let the community know that retailers work so closely with the charitable food system, and there's so much investment happening to make sure that food is not going to waste and that it is getting to individuals who need it most. So that's a great thing to remind folks of those partnerships and what's happening at a community level also.
No, I'm aware of the Roundup. I see it at the checkout pretty often whenever I'm
Mhm.
grocery shopping. I think it's great. I try to do it whenever I can. The idea of the logistics, it is amazing. Like we see the food line, we see the people getting the food, we think of the people giving the food out, but all that logistics that goes in between to make sure it gets there before it spoils, before it's getting it's like people don't see that all the time, and that's a big part of this. And I'm just amazed by that work every day, to be honest, just on a
Yeah,
personal
and
level.
that's what food banks do well. Food banks
Yeah.
do large scale volume um, sourcing and distribution well. And then they're supporting a network of local pantries and
Yep.
feeding programs. That's what people really see. They're familiar with their local church pantry, but that logistics expertise of the food banks and those partnerships with retailers, that's helping to make sure those resources meet reach those community programs that folks are familiar with, and that's the support that they're able to provide. We have almost 3,000 partner agencies in our network, and all of this is working together to make sure that they're being resourced and again meeting neighbors.
No, I think it's amazing because, yeah, the individual church or individual community group may not have those corporate connections, may not have
Right.
that reach. And that's the void a lot of the work you are doing. I think that's amazing.
Yeah.
So we talk a lot about the food that we're talking about. Is there any fun I'm going to kind of shift gears here slightly. Like with the food donations, you guys, any of these donations ever spark a fun conversation or a surprise when it does get delivered to the food bank? I imagine you guys see all kinds of donations of every size and measure. I'd love to know more if you have a good story on that. I'll
Oh,
put them
I
on the spot.
mean, the partnerships with retailers are fantastic, and I think, uh, we always said, and it probably even a little different now, but it's always about a third, a third, a third in terms of retail donations, retail pickup, federal commodity programs from USDA that connect farmers, and then a third of kind of purchased food that the food banks have to go out and kind of source separately from donations. And so it's such a strong partnership. I mean, I always think of, the turkeys around the holidays, coming
Mm,
out of the holiday season. large donations of turkeys that then are turned around within a week and distributed out to families in the community. So,
Yeah.
it's just a fantastic partnership that, I think benefits both sides.
No, I've seen the lines for those events. It is remarkable. And it's like, yeah, get the turkey. I think it's great.
Yeah.
Um,
And I mentioned Boundless Collaboration earlier through which is a grant program through Feeding America that the Mark facilitates. And again, that's a really, I think that's something where we see some donations come in that are just, things you might not think that you'd see. And then they're able to mix these kind of dry grocery goods with fresh produce. And then food banks or food pantries are receiving these really well-rounded um, deliveries of products thanks to retail partners. And, I think that gives just more choice to neighbors. I mean, we're always trying to ensure that neighbors have choice and dignity in their experiences and visiting pantries and utilizing food banks. So yeah, there's a lot of goodwill that happens through these partnerships.
well, that dignity part's a big deal because, it's a big deal to go and ask for help. You don't want to make people
Mhm.
jump through hoops and feel shame about that. That's a thing. I just on a side, I just find it amazing, like all the donations that do come in, like, you don't see it so much in the cities as much, but one of the ways I find fascinating is people that will donate the venison at, like I was touching on earlier, the
Mhm.
hunting
Mhm.
season. I find that amazing. Like until I got involved with the work, I was like, I didn't even think of that. Of course they do. Why not? Those stories always just kind of tickle me a little bit. But so is there a particular moment behind the scenes, during the day, during your work where you're like, yes, this matters? You ever have a moment like that?
I mean, I know I'm personally reminded frequently, but for me, it's when we get to visit the food banks, and because we're doing office work, we're
Yeah.
supporting the network. So when we're out at the food banks, um, one of our food banks, the Greater Pittsburgh Community Food Bank, has a fantastic partnership with their local retailer, and they have their on-site pantry is actually designed like a grocery store, and
Wow.
we've been able to be there multiple times when they're getting ready to open for neighbors to visit, and that's really rewarding to see. Going back to your point about dignity, to see this experience that's been created to feel just like you're shopping in a grocery store and you get to choose your own products, and there's someone there to help if you have questions or need help. But that's really amazing to be able to see those kinds of environments and experiences. Healthy Pantry is a similar
I was
thing.
about to say that's exactly the Healthy Pantry initiative with the point system.
Yeah,
It's amazing work.
and just like seeing neighbors did get to go to a Healthy Pantry distribution and just seeing um, how much having access to healthy fruits and vegetables makes a difference to someone who's experiencing hunger. So I personally have a lot of those moments where, um, just reminding ourselves we're here to support those food banks, so those moments can happen as frequently as possible.
No, it's awesome. No, the Healthy Pantry initiative, I think it's a great program. But so Ryan, I have a bit of a question for you here, a little policy question. So, from a policy perspective, where do you see the strongest overlaps between Feeding PA's priorities and the needs of the food and beverage retailers on the ground?
Yeah. Yeah, I think certainly, we obviously already touched on SNAP, but I don't think you can overemphasize
Nope.
how important SNAP is to the food industry, retailers, and certainly obviously the charitable food system and ultimately the hungry Pennsylvanians that it helps serve. So off the bat, there's over 10,000 retailers in Pennsylvania that are SNAP EBT retailers, and like I said, every dollar of SNAP that is invested into those grocery stores, those retailers, those food supply
Yeah.
chains, creates $1.50 in economic activity. So I think can't overemphasize the importance of SNAP enough. It's just a fantastic program that I think we all want to see be a robust program that anybody in need, anybody that's eligible and in need and needs food assistance, can access easily. Kind of also in the SNAP space, Julie started talking about dignity, and we've mentioned dignity, maintaining the dignity of our clients, and I think that's in the SNAP space something we also continue to work on. Right, I talking to retailers, to friends, families that have worked in grocery stores and other retailers. One of the worst things is when you have to turn someone away at the checkout because they don't have enough on their EBT card,
Yeah.
or that yeah, they run out of funds on the card, or whatever it might be, and have to hold up the line, the embarrassment of having to pull out the EBT card and have that conversation. So maintaining the dignity, allowing SNAP recipients to purchase what they want, just like any other person in a grocery store. I think that's super important to maintaining dignity. And then I think
Yeah.
the one more thing on the
No,
SNAP
please.
side too, I guess, is SNAP skimming.
Mm.
Something that we've heard, has only grown over the past 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
And SNAP skimming is, like any other fraud. A skimming device is put on the point of sale terminal. Everybody can face this at gas stations. We're all familiar with the idea of, criminals stealing credit card, debit card information off of point of sale terminals. And so we have seen and continue to see an uptick in the number of SNAP skimming cases across the entire Commonwealth. And we'd really love to see some type of resolution to this, which includes, allowing folks who get their benefits stolen to get those benefits replaced. And also, we have to look at long-term solutions like moving to chipped EBT cards,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
There's all of us, I think most credit cards, debit cards now have the little chip device that
Oh,
allows
yeah.
you to tap, much more secure, prevents skimming. And so, long term, we really need to look towards solutions like that on EBT cards. And then, kind of not in the SNAP space, but policy related, that's also been touched on is the food waste. Right, we grow enough food in Pennsylvania across the United States to ensure that nobody goes hungry.
Right.
It's much more a question of getting creating access and getting it to the right place and ensuring those people have the resources to access that food. And so we were really happy, this past year, State Representatives Jones and Khan, House Bill 615, changed the limited liability laws for food donations. That made it much easier for retailers and the like to make donations to food banks. Perfectly edible, nutritious food that for one reason or another, sometimes, the can was too big and the food banks couldn't break it down or whatever it might be. But this is perfectly, good, nutritious food that can be brought into food banks. And so I think really addressing food waste, creating that infrastructure that Julie mentioned earlier to connect retailers directly to food pantries. So, you don't even have to use the food banks. And you can get that really, close to old or close to expiration product directly out into the community and used before it goes bad.
Yeah, we were very excited to see those laws pass. Yeah, we were very, very, very stoked about that. So talking about the food rescue here a little bit, we kind of touched on this a little bit with the waste and everything, but with food recovery and rescue, I know those have changed a lot over the recent years. We've talked about apps, we've talked about different methods of distribution on that stuff. I'd love to hear a little bit more about, how those partnerships have changed and what tools we're doing. I'd just like to pull that thread a little bit more about what we're doing with food recovery and rescue.
Yeah, I think I keep going back to the boundless collaboration that the Mark is engaged in because I think that has been something that's been just really innovative and creates that level of collaboration with retailers and manufacturers and again just that tailored approach. Um, I think that's what we continue to see evolve is that more tailored approach to distribution and how we're sharing those resources rather than just saying, here's a truckload of peanut butter and we're just going to send it here whether you need it or not. Like I think that's really where innovations in recovery and waste reduction have occurred is really getting very good at the logistics to tailor those solutions so that um, not only are we reducing the waste from the retailer standpoint, but once it enters the charitable food system, also making sure that it's not being wasted once it gets there because it's getting to the communities who need it most. And I think that's what has been really interesting to see evolve is just that ability to tailor those solutions and those distributions and to mix products. Mixing product it sounds basic, but it's actually something that we all continue to work at. The Mark is very involved in. So they created what's called a mixing center to mix these products to redistribute them, and I think again it's creating those tailored solutions, which just helps to further reduce waste.
No, I think that's great. So we kind of were talking with some of the laws that have passed with this stuff, and I love to know when you're talking with lawmakers, what do you wish they understood better about hunger, food access, and the roles retailers play in supporting the statewide food network?
Yeah. A couple thoughts come to mind with that.
Yeah.
One being that hunger exists everywhere, in every community, every district across the Commonwealth.
Hmm.
Oftentimes it's invisible, but we see it manifest in children misbehaving at school, seniors facing soaring healthcare costs, parents skipping meals so their kids don't have enough so their kids do have enough to eat, and then kind of eating whatever's left over after they go to bed. These are some of the stories we hear all the time, and I think that's one thing I would like to emphasize is that hunger exists everywhere, right? It's
Yes.
not a rural, suburban, or urban problem. It is in every community, every district, and it's not usually what you think it looks like, right? It's hard to spot. It's often invisible. The number two thing I think I'd like to emphasize is hunger is a symptom of other societal challenges,
Right.
including high prices of everything right now: energy, food, lack of affordable housing, lack of well-paying, family-sustaining jobs, and that results in food often being one of the first things to go, or that neighbors will skip when they're kind of having to make these trade-offs. Right? Do I pay the rent? Or do I buy food? And it's like, well, maybe I can, skip a little food, or maybe I can get by with just one meal today, or maybe I can get by with just, the little bit of food that I can pick up at the gas station convenience store. And so, it's we recognize that hunger is downstream, but it also makes it, I think, all that more important, recognizing that this is, food is often one of the things that folks will forgo when they're facing these important trade-offs. And so then I think kind of in the importance of the partnership, the partnership between Feeding Pennsylvania, our food banks, our retail community, the Food Merchants Association, is really strong. And I think we all share the same goal of ensuring all Pennsylvanians, no matter where you live, your economic background, that you have access to healthy, nutritious, and adequate amount of food. And so it really is a great partnership. I think I always emphasize to anybody I talk to. I really think more than anything, the food system, the food chain, is integrated more than any other system. Right from the farmer who grows it, like I kind of spelled out earlier, to the truck driver that transports it, to the distribution center worker, to the cashier that ultimately rings you up when you're checking out. And so it really is such a strong partnership. But recognizing how integrated that system is, we really do rely on each other so much. And ultimately, we know that no matter if you go to a grocery store, if sometimes you need to turn to a food bank at the end of the month, maybe when your Social Security runs out, or you just can't make ends meet, you had an emergency that month. We share that same goal of ensuring all Pennsylvanians have access to enough food to thrive.
No, you're absolutely right about how it's downstream. I remember back in 2007 or 8 when the economy collapsed. I was a young kid. I went on food stamps for the summer, and it's all downstream of economic changes. Like you're completely correct on that. And to the invisibility point, like we think of these wealthier counties around the Commonwealth, and there's food banks in those counties. We
Mhm.
think of like Chester, Monco, not to single them out, but like they're wealthier counties and they have food banks in them, and people often don't see the invisibility of that hunger, and it's just kind of sad.
Yeah, it's
But
not what you see on TV. It's like I said, it's skipping meals. It's the kid that might be getting free breakfast, free lunch at school.
yeah.
There's all sorts of circumstances that result in someone skipping meals, being hungry, being food insecure, and I encourage folks to recognize that it's not what you expect to see.
Yeah, it's usually just one life decision, like a medical diagnosis, a rent increase, a car repair. That one circumstance can be the thing that forces someone to need to turn to the charitable food system. Like just, that one thing can be the determining factor of not being able to make ends meet. And I think just not losing sight of that humanity, that,
The dignity of it. Yeah.
how quickly any of us could be in that situation.
No, I
And I'll
completely agree.
add, just not to keep going on the point, but John, to your point too, it's usually temporary, right?
Yeah.
It's folks when they lose a job, they have to rely on SNAP for a couple of months until they can get back on their feet. And so, again, I think it also goes back to that waste, fraud, abuse kind of notion that it's people aren't living off a SNAP. It's a very supplemental benefit that most people go on off kind of as they need it when there's a life circumstance, when there's a job loss, when there's an economic crisis, an economic downturn.
And a few of those in our lifetime. Yeah, that happens. So, we've been talking about some heavy stuff. Let me lighten things up ever so slightly, guys. So, if Feeding PA had a mascot that showed up at your events, what do you think that mascot would be?
That's a good question.
I know
Some
some
of
of
our
your
food banks do
partners have
have
had some.
mascots. Our food banks do have mascots like carrots and beets, and so I would like to think we'd be like a basket of produce,
I
a
like
whole
that.
basket.
I
I
like
could
that.
see, just because we're coming up on our Fill a Glass with Hope fundraiser that is, all focused on milk, we could have a Chick-fil-A cow.
There you- I like that. So, my last question as we wrap up here. So, looking ahead, what does the future hold for Feeding PA, and where do you see the biggest opportunities to work even more closely with the food and beverage industry?
Yeah, I think again, I cannot stress enough the value of the collaboration and integration of retail partners in the charitable food system. And I hope that we continue to see kind of a mutually beneficial relationship continue. And I expect that we will. Like Ryan said, so much of this, I think that the challenging thing, and I really appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation and tell the story, because people I don't think, connect the dots, because so much of this is happening behind the scenes, but it is so integrated and so collaborative that it
Hmm.
appears to be seamless, and it's not. There's a ton of logistics happening behind the scenes. So I hope that that continues. I hope that we continue to find ways that that retailers are working proactively with the charitable food system to really work on that inventory management and food waste reduction, and also kind of like identifying need and how can we fill those gaps, and I think that happens now, but just in the spirit of continuing to get better and more efficient. I think I expect that will continue, and I do hope that we can continue to tell the story of that deep collaboration.
This was a great conversation. A big thank you to Julie Bancroft and Ryan Prater from Feeding Pennsylvania for joining us for the work that you guys do in strengthening food access across the Commonwealth. To learn more about Feeding Pennsylvania, their network of food banks, or ways the food and beverage industry can get involved, visit feedingpa.org. Thanks for listening to Shelf Confidence. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share it with a colleague, and leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you're listening. Until next time, I'm John Zimmerman, and this is Shelf Confidence.